going to hand this over to our presenter, to Ms. Jaroudi. So the virtual floor is yours.
Well, thanks so much for having me. In the chat, if you can let me know if you can hear me, let me know in the chat if I sound nice and clear. I always do this with my students just to double check. So my name is Mrs. Jaroudi. I teach 7th and 8th grade art here at the school, but I also help run the cooking club at the school. So if you love to cook, it's open to all grades. During the school year, we meet once to twice a month and do cooking things just like we're going to do today. So something to keep your eyes out if you do want to join cooking club. I run it, so it's very similar to how we're going to do today. So we're going to get started with our recipe, and we are making edible cookie dough. And I love this recipe because secretly it's pretty good for you, because we're going to put a secret ingredient in this, but I feel like I can have it more often, and it also doesn't have to necessarily be at nighttime, because there's so many great ingredients in this. So I kind of get away with having cookie dough more often by making it this way. And I promise you, you can't tell a difference. So we're going to use two things today. We're going to use our blender to blend everything up, and then we're going to also use the oven. And just like we said at the beginning, just make sure you have an adult with you to supervise you when you're in the kitchen, because we want to make sure we're staying nice and safe. So the first thing we're going to use is my secret ingredient, and that is a can of chickpeas. Chickpeas and beans, you might not think go with cookie dough, but surprisingly, it's going to make up most of the bulk of the recipe. And it's also secretly kind of tastes, it can kind of hide and mimic peanut butter taste. So it's a great one to add in. And again, you can tell your parents or learning coaches that, hey, there's a can of chickpeas in this. So it's pretty healthy. So again, I feel like I can get away with having it a little bit more often, because again, there's a whole can of chickpeas. So I just have a 15-ounce can, and we're just gonna remove the lid and dump it all in.
Ms. Jaroudi, I have a couple questions. If someone doesn't have a blender, could they maybe mash these stuff up by hand?
So if you mash it by hand, it'll be really hard to do. So I would use a food processor. If you don't have a blender, that would probably be the next thing. We want to get it nice and smooth.
And what if someone is allergic to chickpeas? Could they use another kind of bean, like a white bean or something?
Yep, so a white bean would work perfect in a sub for chickpeas. So if you have a can of white beans, that's the way I would go. All right, our can of chickpeas, and we're just dumping in the liquid and everything into the blender. So it's really easy. You don't even have to strain or do anything with the sink. It's all just kind of added in. And that liquid is gonna help us move our blender and get it nice and smooth. All right, up next, I have 1/4 of a cup of a nut butter or a seed butter. So I'm using some almond butter that I already have pre-measured out right now. But if you have a nut allergy, you also could use a seed butter. Like you could use sesame seed or pumpkin seeds, or even sunflower seed butter. And you can use any kind of nut butter if you can have nuts in this as well. And this is gonna kind of hide the chickpea flavor, right? We don't want this to taste like chickpeas. You want it to taste like cookie dough. So this is a nice addition. So this is just some almond butter, 1/4 cup that I measured out beforehand. I'm just gonna add in. And again, it's just gonna kind of mimic, it's gonna hide all of that chickpea flavor, but also make it nice and creamy and delicious like cookie dough. All right, so now that's all in there. Up next is our sweetener of choice, and also it's going to act as kind of a thickener to make this nice and thick, because cookie dough is a really thick batter. And how many of you guys have tried dates before? You might have not. I don't know if I've tried dates at your age. This is something that has been new to me over the last couple years, but it's actually a dried fruit. So dates you can find at most grocery stores now, and it's just a dried fruit. If you don't have dates, you could use something like dried figs or even raisins. You can use a bunch of raisins for this, some kind of dried fruit, and that's going to act as the bulk. It's going to be nice and thick, because look how nice and thick a date is. Again, this is just a dried fruit. You guys might have not heard of it, but they do sell them at most grocery stores now, usually over with the fruit. And what you do is you have to make sure you open up your date and remove the seed inside. So inside each date is a seed that you just want to take out so it's not in your blender, but it should be nice and soft and kind of caramely. These are really good on their own. You can just eat them as well. So far what we've done is we've done the chickpeas. We opened up our chickpea with the liquid. We've put in our nut butter or seed butter. And now we're going to put in our 3 pitted dates. So they're pretty large sized. And this is going to thicken and be the sweetener for it. So it's going to make it taste nice and sweet like cookie dough. But again, it's actually fruit, dried fruit. So again, it's kind of, you know, a healthy alternative too to add in, and you can't tell because these taste so much like caramel. Okay, so I have 3 of them in there. You can add more if you think it needs to be sweeter. That's fine. This is gonna get nice and thick. And then we're almost done. This is like such an easy recipe. And I'll take questions at the end too, if you guys ask about substitutions or any ideas. But we're gonna add in some baking powder and baking soda to this. And it's the same amount, it's half of a teaspoon of both. So I have some baking powder and baking soda. And alternative for dates would be a different kind of dried fruit. So if you have raisins, if you have, there's dried figs you can get, some kind of dried fruit. And it's nice to keep it with raisins and figs and dates so that it doesn't have a super powerful flavor. Like if you use dried apricots, that might give it a kind of different flavor. So I try to stick with things that are a little bit more neutral in taste. This is our baking powder and our baking soda. And we're just throwing it all into the blender and we're gonna blend this up nice and smooth. Now, the only thing I'm not gonna put in here is our chocolate chips because I want them to be mixed in by hand. If you throw your chocolate chips in now, it'll make it chocolatey, which is perfect if you love chocolate. You can make this chocolate cookie dough, right? So if you wanna make this chocolatey, you can add it in and blend it up, but I'm just gonna put it in by hand because I kind of wanna see my chocolate chips. So this is the baking soda. And that's it for the blender. And then the last ingredient again is just chocolate chips. I have some over here, but we're gonna do that at the very end. So I'm gonna blend this first. All right, the next step to getting our station ready is what we're gonna put it in after it's blended. So I'm just gonna make my area. And I'm gonna do these in ramekins. You can find them at most stores, if your family has it as well. They come in all different sizes. So depending on what size yours is will depend on how many you get. These are pretty big size ramekins, so I might only get 4 to 5. If you have smaller ones, you may get closer to 6. And what we're gonna do is we are gonna bake this. You don't wanna eat it straight out of the blender because there's baking soda and baking powder in here. Those probably shouldn't be eaten raw. So we are gonna bake it, but it's still gonna have the same consistency as cookie dough when we go to eat it at the end. But again, I'm just putting them in these little oven-safe ramekins. And what I like to do is I like to grab a baking sheet just to kind of help me transfer these and make everything a little safer. So I actually put my ramekins on my baking sheet when I make these. And that way, whenever I pull them out of the oven, it's all pulled out together instead of having to grab one to one, right? They can all be put in and taken out safely. So I'm gonna do that as well. So I'm gonna blend this for a second. I'm gonna mute myself so you guys don't have to hear the blender, and then I'll show you guys what it looks like. So 1 second.
And for anyone who's trying to follow the steps, basically you're gonna put everything except the chocolate chips into the blender, blend it up, and then you're gonna add the chocolate chips by hand. I put the ingredients and the amounts there in the chat, and these were also in the emails that went to your adult. So you can either look at the chat or you can check the emails if you wanna double check the amounts. Sophia, is a half teaspoon of baking powder and a half teaspoon of baking soda. If you don't add the dried fruit, Sophia, you're not going to get as much of the sweetness. Miss Jaroudi, if someone doesn't want to use dried fruit, is there another option?
So you could use a different kind of sugar if you want to sweeten it. It would just kind of, I would start slow and then add, you know, to your taste. I wouldn't start with like 1/4 of a cup of sugar. The only other thing that the dates and the dried fruit do is it adds bulk. So it's going to make it a little bit of a thicker cookie dough consistency. So it kind of acts as a good thickener as well. So just keep in mind, if you kind of go further away from the recipe, it might not have the same results at the end. All right, let me grab a glass bowl just so you guys can see, and we're just blending it until everything is all chopped up. So if you can't see any of your dried fruit anymore, then you know it's blended enough. So I'll show you guys what it looks like. Let me grab a glass bowl. That way you guys can really see. So I'm gonna pour it in here. Let me grab my spatula. You guys can see, and you'll see it's pretty thick, so it almost looks like peanut butter whenever it's all blended, but it's a nice thickness. You shouldn't be able to tell that there's any beans in here. You shouldn't be able to tell that there's any dried fruit, and it'll thicken up even a little bit more as it bakes. Okay, just to show you guys what it looks like. So it's nice and thick, and it should look nice and creamy. It should be blended nice and smooth. So everyone's blender is going to be slightly different for how long, but again, you just really want everything to be blended up really well. So at this stage, you can add some chocolate chips of your choice. So I go ahead and you can add as many as you want. I usually do like 2 handfuls. And that works out to be pretty good. And then I just go ahead and fold that in by hand. And then I'm just going to evenly spread them out into my ramekins and bake them. So this goes in at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. And you can spread them out for however long you have. So I'm just going to put the amount in. And again, I just try to kind of even them between the 4 that I have here. And it'll rise a little bit because we did put that baking powder in here. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to fill them all the way up to the top brim.
Ms. Jaroudi, have you ever done this with like cranberries or apricots or any other kind of dried fruit? Does it work the same?
So unfortunately, with other dried fruits that are more like acidic or tart, it'll just change it a little bit, that it won't taste like peanut buttery cookie dough that we're looking for. So okay, it still will turn out really great. It just, it won't be the same like peanut buttery, and all of this kind of works really well together. The chickpeas with the dates, with the nut or seed butter, it just kind of does the magical little combination that does, you know, if you gave it to somebody who didn't know what was in it, they would probably think it's cookie dough.
So we should stick with the traditional chocolate chips here.
If you want exactly how it's meant to be, yes, it'll still work. It'll just be a little bit different of a flavor. Might not be exactly, it might be a great like mousse that you're going for if you change up a couple of things. So I'm just kind of scraping. I really want to get all of it out of my blender. Just takes a moment to really, all right, get it all out. And then this will go into the oven. Again, it takes around 30 minutes. And I just like to kind of really make sure I get all the batter in here. And then I'm just gonna smooth out each of them. So I just so far have dolloped it in. I just like to take my spatula and just go around and just kind of make sure each that it's kind of a smoother top like that. All right, and it'll just depend on how big your amounts are.
Now we have someone who doesn't have baking soda. Now I know baking soda and baking powder are not the same thing, but If they don't have baking soda, can they still make the dish right now? Or is there something they could do without it, or can they go without it?
So baking soda and baking powder are need for this recipe. It's kind of a key part. You could try it. I just can't guarantee it'll come out 100%.
Okay. Yeah.
But
Yep. So if you don't have baking soda or baking powder, you can try it. It may not rise as much and it may not turn out exactly the same. But you can go ahead and try it and you can let us know how it turned out, because maybe it'll turn out perfect for you. But yeah, if you don't have baking soda or baking powder, it's not going to have the chemical reaction and rise as much, but you can still go ahead and give it a try and it'll probably still be pretty yummy.
And that's what I love about baking and cooking, is that you can experiment and make up your own recipes. You might want to try something that you like that might be a little bit different. So that's what I try to teach in our cooking clubs too. And again, if anyone wants to join this school year, I also let the students run it. So if you have a recipe that you want to make, just like how I shared today in the cooking club, and teach a recipe. We had a student this past school year do a mug microwavable cake, where they just made it all in a kind of like a coffee mug, and then we microwaved it and it made a cake, which was really awesome. We've done all different kinds of recipes that students want to share. So if there's something that maybe you come up with this summer, or one that you just love making with your family and you want to teach it, I'm always open to have students get involved. All right, so now these are just going to go into the oven, and then you will have your cookie dough that's edible and safe. And again, you can probably get away with having your learning coaches maybe let you make it more often, because again, there's some really fun ingredients that you might not think of. And I also love to make this for people, and I don't tell them that there's beans or things in here, and see if they can tell, right? So if you maybe are making this with your learning coach, and maybe you have a friend over or something like that, you might want to try to see if they can tell. Have them guess what they think is in it, and I guarantee that they won't guess chickpeas or dates or anything else. But yeah, then you have these beautiful little cookie doughs. And I'm going to bake these off, and then I'm set for a little while for having dessert, over summer break. So I hope you guys all enjoyed. Does anyone have any questions? I'm just going to go and put these in the oven now.
If you have any questions, go ahead and write them in the chat here. And also, when you finish your baking your edible cookie dough, make sure that you have your learning coach or your adult send them over to us so we can see them.
Yeah, and that looks like the perfect consistency. I'm looking at Joan's on the camera, and hers looks fantastic. Can see her making it.
I see Shelby's got some going on over there too.
Very cool.
Right. So no more questions? Y'all don't have any questions?
It's a quick recipe, and that's the other thing is that I love is that it's just so quick that it doesn't take long. And that's what I love doing in the kitchen, is experimenting and making stuff that doesn't take a lot of ingredients either. So you probably, you might have it or something close to it.
Yeah. Amina says the chickpeas smell like cat food. Some beans can smell interesting. Kobe, you bake it at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. So for a half an hour. Now, Ms. Jaroudi, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't this the kind of recipe that can be good for people who can't have bread, who have to be gluten-free because they can't have the gluten from wheat? So
yeah, it's actually gluten-free and it's dairy-free. If you pick dairy-free, if you pick like dark chocolate chips, it can even be dairy-free. So this is a really nice one. And then again, if you have a nut allergy, you can swap it out for something that maybe like a seed, like sunflower seeds are sometimes safe for allergies. So this could be very, very friendly if you, have someone in your house that can't have certain things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. Any last call for questions? Does anyone have any more questions for Ms. Jaroudi? Just waiting. No more questions.
And I'll be back, I think, next week for an art summer camp as well.
Yeah, I believe you're doing, is it the stained glass one. Yes, I think that I think I'm on that one too. So I will probably see you again. Maya, I'll send that link in just a second. Actually, let me send it right now. So this is, as promised, this is the YouTube link for yesterday's session. Okay. All right, everyone, that was awesome and so much fun. I'm really excited to see photos of your baked goods. So make sure you send those along. And if you have any questions, you can, put them in right now, the last minute. But Ms. Jaroudi, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And just to remind everybody, a recording of the session is going to be available on the YouTube page in the next day or so. And if you're going to come with us, see us tomorrow, grab some sponges and some hair ties, because we're going to make some sponge bombs. And then you soak them in water, and then they're a fun summer toy. So you do not want to miss that, because that's going to be awesome. So I hope you all had a ton of fun, and I hope to see you we'll see you at tomorrow's session. All right. See you, everybody. Thank you, Ms. Jaroudi.
Bye, guys.